periods in your life which have left unhappy scars on your memory.
What then prompted you to accept our invitation to relive your life with us here, Francis?
I would very much like to correct some impressions which arose out of a lot of stories that were written about me, I guess, but they weren't about me, suggesting things that I could possibly have been doing which I never did.
Hollywood adores a clean ending, the redemption arc, the standing ovation, the perfect speech. But behind the billboards, the town doesn't reward courage. It rewards silence. And when a star breaks that silence, when they dare to name injustice, the lights don't shine brighter. They shut off. One day you're a box office draw, the next, you're controversy. The phone stops ringing, contracts vanish, headlines shift from praise to ridicule. In Hollywood, the truth isn't measured by what happened, it's measured by how fiercely the machine pushes back. The cost is never displayed in dollars. It appears in vanished roles, doors that no longer open, whispers labeling you difficult, unstable, and ungrateful. The language is polite. The punishment is not. Tonight, we revisit 15 stories Hollywood would rather bury rebels, whistleblowers, and artists who chose truth over silence. They spoke, and the industry made them pay. Justice, silence, the price of truth. Number 1. Frances Farmer. Frances Farmer swept into Hollywood like a storm no one saw coming. With piercing eyes and an icy beauty, she didn't resemble any star of her time. At her peak, she was hailed as the rebel queen of the silver screen, a raw talent who could pull audiences into any role.
Fuck you all! As a result...
1. Frances Farmer. Frances Farmer swept into Hollywood like a storm no one saw coming. With piercing eyes and an icy beauty, she didn't resemble any star of her time. At her peak, she was hailed as the rebel queen of the silver screen, a raw talent who could pull audiences into any role. But what set Frances apart wasn't just her looks or her skill, it was her mind, her unyielding independence, a quality the studio system of the 1940s despised. When executives tried to mold her into a controllable product, Frances pushed back. She openly criticized the industry's fakery, refused meaningless publicity stunts, and questioned the absolute power of the men in charge. In that era, such defiance was nothing less than career suicide. The backlash was merciless. Newspapers painted her as unstable, difficult, and dangerous. Whispers turned into headlines, and soon the rumors eclipsed her talent. After a very public arrest, Frances was committed to a psychiatric hospital. There, reports claimed she endured brutal treatments, electroshock, forced therapies, the kind meant not to heal, but to break. When she was finally released, the woman who returned was a shadow of the star who had once defied Hollywood. The roles were gone. Her voice was gone. Even the light in her eyes seemed gone. Frances Farmer's life became a grim reminder. In a town built on absolute power, telling the truth doesn't just end your career, it can erase you. 2. Eartha Kitt. Before she ever became a voice, she was a vision. Eartha Kitt, with her feline grace and smoky purr, wasn't just an entertainer, she was a force of nature wrapped in satin. She conquered Broadway, lit up nightclubs from Paris to New York, and stole every scene she touched on screen. In the 1950s and 60s, she was the very definition of glamour with an edge, a woman who owned every room she walked into. But that edge cut both ways. In 1968, Eartha was invited to a White House luncheon hosted by First Lady Lady Bird Johnson. The room was filled with Washington's most polished smiles. Then came the moment that would change her life. When the topic of the Vietnam War arose, Eartha didn't flatter or sidestep. She told the First Lady to her face that the war was tearing America apart and destroying young lives. The room froze. Politeness shattered. Within days, she was branded unpatriotic. Calls stopped coming. Contracts dried up. She found herself blacklisted in the United States, her once glittering career reduced to whispers and closed doors. For nearly a decade, Eartha worked primarily in Europe and Asia, adored abroad but a ghost in her own country. When she finally returned to the American spotlight in the late 1970s, She carried herself with the same poise, but the message was clear. In Hollywood and Washington alike, there is a price for speaking the truth to power, and it is steep. Eartha Kitt paid it in full, not with her talent, but with her exile. 3. Sinead O'Connor. She didn't look like anyone else in pop music. Sinead O'Connor, with her shaved head and piercing gaze, carried a voice that could haunt you for days. In the late 1980s, she was more than a singer. She was a revelation. Her album I Do Not Want What I Haven't Got turned her into a global icon, and her rendition of Nothing Compares to You became a timeless anthem of heartbreak. But Sinead was never interested in just selling records. She had a fire in her that refused to be packaged or silenced. That fire burned brightest and most dangerously on October 3, 1992, when she appeared as the musical guest on Saturday Night Live. Mid-performance, she held up a photo of Pope John Paul II, stared into the camera, and tore it to pieces. "Fight the real enemy," she declared. The moment was electric, but the fallout was brutal. The audience in the studio sat in stunned silence. By the next morning, the media had turned on her completely. Radio stations banned her music. She was booed off stage at a Bob Dylan tribute concert. Former fans called her a disgrace. Few cared to hear her explanation that it was a protest against child abuse within the Catholic Church, years before the full scope of the scandal came to light. Sinead didn't lose her voice that night, but she lost the stage that had made it powerful. She kept making music, but the industry never embraced her again. In speaking out, she told the truth before the world was ready to hear it, and in return, the world punished her for it. Mo'Nique. When Mo'Nique stood on the stage at the 2010 Academy Awards, holding her Oscar for Precious, she seemed untouchable. A powerhouse comedian turned dramatic actress, she had just delivered one of the most harrowing performances of the decade. Her acceptance speech, elegant and measured, thanked the Academy for showing it can be about the performance and not the politics. But in Hollywood, politics is never far away. Not long after her win, whispers began to circulate. According to Mo'Nique, she was labeled difficult after refusing to campaign for her Oscar, including traditionally endless interviews, glad-handing, and unpaid promotional appearances for the film. She believed her work should speak for itself. The industry believed otherwise. The tension grew when she began speaking openly about inequality in Hollywood. She accused powerful figures, including producer Lee Daniels, Oprah Winfrey, and Tyler Perry, of blackballing her for refusing to play the game. Offers slowed to a trickle. Studio meetings dried up. Mo'Nique, an Oscar-winning actress in her prime, found herself on the outside looking in. Her candor came at a steep cost. She went from the height of critical acclaim to being virtually erased from major film opportunities. Years later, she would mount a public fight, suing Netflix for discrimination and forcing the conversation about pay equity for Black women in entertainment into the spotlight. Mo'Nique's story is a reminder that in Hollywood, silence is often rewarded more than honesty. She chose honesty, and she paid for it with the very currency the industry values most: visibility. 5. Rose McGowan. In the late 1990s, Rose McGowan was a name you couldn't ignore. With her striking looks and fearless screen presence, she lit up cult classics like Scream and became a fixture in glossy magazines. But behind the glamour, McGowan was carrying a secret that would one day ignite one of the most powerful reckonings Hollywood had ever seen. In 1997, she says she was assaulted by film mogul Harvey Weinstein during the Sundance Film Festival. Like so many in the industry, she was silenced by fear, stigma, and a legal settlement. For years, she kept working, starring in Charmed, walking red carpets, smiling for the cameras, all while the weight of what happened pressed down on her. But McGowan was not built to stay silent forever. In 2016 and 2017, she began speaking out on social media, refusing to hide the truth any longer. When the New York Times and the New Yorker exposed Weinstein's pattern of abuse, her name became synonymous with the Me Too movement. She was hailed as a hero by many, but the backlash was swift and merciless. She claims she was followed, harassed, and targeted by private investigators. Jobs in film all but disappeared. Some colleagues distanced themselves. The industry that once celebrated her now regarded her as radioactive. And yet, McGowan didn't back down. She published a memoir, Brave, and used her platform to call out not just Weinstein, but the entire system that protected him. Rose McGowan's career may have been collateral damage, but her voice became something larger, a weapon that could no longer be muted. In speaking her truth, she lost the Hollywood she knew, but she may have helped burn down the parts of it that needed to fall. 6. Megan Fox. When Megan Fox exploded onto the screen in Transformers in 2007, she was instantly branded Hollywood's new bombshell. With razor-sharp cheekbones, electric blue eyes, and a mix of innocence and danger, she became one of the most photographed women in the world. Studios lined up to put her face on posters, magazines crowned her the sexiest woman alive, and her name was synonymous with a new era of blockbuster glamour. But Megan's rise came with a hidden trap, one she would discover the moment she spoke her mind. In a 2009 interview, she described director Michael Bay as someone who wants to be like Hitler on his sets and criticized the industry's hypersexualization of young women. The fallout was immediate and ugly. Crew members from Transformers publicly attacked her. Anonymous letters appeared online, painting her as ungrateful and difficult, and, when Transformers: Dark of the Moon was announced, her name was gone from the cast list. The message was clear. In Hollywood, a woman could be worshipped for her looks, but not respected for her voice. For years, Fox was written off as a cautionary tale, reduced to punchlines and "What happened to her?" headlines. Roles in major films disappeared, and she was often cast only in projects that leaned on the same shallow image she had once spoken against. It would take nearly a decade and a cultural shift in how the world talks about women in Hollywood for Megan to begin reclaiming her narrative. Looking back, she called her blacklisting absolutely deliberate, the price for refusing to stay quiet about the exploitation she'd witnessed and experienced. Megan Fox learned early that in the movie business, beauty can open doors, but truth can slam them shut just as fast. 7. Brendan Fraser. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Brendan Fraser was the kind of movie star Hollywood adored. He could leap across ancient ruins in The Mummy, make audiences laugh in George of the Jungle, and break hearts in Gods and Monsters. He was charming, athletic, and bankable, a rare combination that made him a staple of the big screen. But in 2018, Fraser revealed a different story, one that explained his sudden disappearance from Hollywood's A-list. In an interview with GQ, he alleged that in 2003 he was sexually assaulted by Philip Burke, then president of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. The encounter, he said, left him traumatized and deeply withdrawn. After speaking up, Fraser noticed a shift. Invitations to the Golden Globes stopped arriving. Scripts came less frequently. He began to wonder if he'd been quietly blacklisted. Combined with a series of physical injuries from years of stunt work and a divorce that put his personal life in turmoil, Fraser retreated from the spotlight almost entirely. For more than a decade, he was largely absent from the kind of films that had once defined him. He worked sporadically, often in smaller projects far from the Hollywood machine. The industry seemed to have moved on without him. But Fraser's story didn't end in exile. In 2022, his performance in The Whale brought him back into the center of awards season, culminating in an emotional Best Actor Oscar win. Still, he has refused to attend Golden Globes ceremonies, citing the unresolved pain of what happened. His comeback may be celebrated now, but it came only after years of paying the price for telling a truth the industry didn't want to hear. 8. Corey Feldman. In the 1980s, Corey Feldman was one of Hollywood's most recognizable young faces. With a quick wit and an impish grin, he starred in a string of era-defining hits: The Goonies, Stand By Me, The Lost Boys. Alongside his close friend Corey Haim, he became part of a teen idol phenomenon known simply as the Two Coreys. The future looked limitless. But behind the fun and fame was a darkness Feldman would spend decades trying to expose. In interviews, documentaries, and his memoir Choreography, he alleged that both he and Haim were victims of widespread sexual abuse by powerful men in the entertainment industry. These were not vague claims. Feldman named names, challenging the unspoken rule that such truths should stay buried. The cost was immediate and relentless. Industry insiders dismissed him as unstable. Talk shows mocked his attempts to speak out. Casting directors stopped calling. For years, he was painted not as a whistleblower, but as a washed-up child star clinging to relevance. Even when movements like Me Too and Time's Up gained momentum, Feldman's warnings were often met with skepticism, as though Hollywood still wasn't ready to confront its own crimes against children. He turned to independent projects and self-produced documentaries to get his story out, but doing so made him a target for harassment, online abuse, and even death threats. Still, Feldman insists he will not stop telling the truth, saying it's not just about his past, but about protecting the next generation of young performers. Corey Feldman's career never recovered to its 1980s heights. But for him, the fight has always been bigger than the work he lost. He knows the price of speaking out in Hollywood, and he's still paying it every day. 9. Terry Crews. Terry Crews wasn't just another actor in Hollywood, he was a presence. A former NFL player turned actor, he brought a rare combination of physical power and comedic timing to roles in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Everybody Hates Chris, and a string of blockbuster comedies. Off-screen, he radiated positivity, a larger-than-life personality who seemed untouchable. But in 2017, at the height of the Me Too movement, Crews revealed something few could have imagined. In a series of public statements and a powerful testimony before Congress, he alleged that he had been groped at a Hollywood party by Adam Vennet, a powerful talent agent at William Morris Endeavor. The assault, he said, happened in full view of his wife and other industry figures, and no one stepped in. Speaking out as a man against sexual misconduct in an industry that thrives on image came with risks, and Crews knew it. Soon after going public, he claimed that he was dropped from major projects and received veiled threats warning him to stay silent. He also said he was pressured to let it go if he wanted to keep working in big-budget films. One of his highest-profile roles in the Expendables franchise disappeared after he refused to back down. Still, Crews refused to be intimidated. He filed a lawsuit, ultimately settling, and used his platform to challenge toxic masculinity and the culture of silence that enables abuse. His career survived, but the cost was real. He was forced to fight not just for justice, but for his right to remain in the business at all. Terry Crews' story showed that in Hollywood, speaking the truth isn't just dangerous for women, it's dangerous for anyone who dares to shatter the illusion of untouchable power. 10. Janet Hubert. In the early 1990s, Janet Hubert was known to millions as the original Aunt Viv on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. With her elegance, sharp wit, and commanding presence, she gave the character a dignity and strength that made her more than just a sitcom mom. She was a cultural icon. At the height of the show's success, she seemed set for a long and steady career in television. Then, in 1993, she was gone. The official explanation was a contract dispute, but rumors swirled. Will Smith, the show's star, publicly implied she was difficult to work with. The media painted her as bitter and unprofessional. Overnight, Hubert went from beloved television matriarch to Hollywood pariah. For years, she insisted the story wasn't what people thought. She claimed she had been offered a deeply unfair contract during a difficult time in her personal life. She was a new mother and amid a troubled marriage, and when she pushed back, she was forced out. Speaking up about the situation only seemed to make things worse. Casting directors stopped calling. Former colleagues distanced themselves. She said she was effectively blacklisted. It took nearly 3 decades for the truth, or at least a fuller version of it, to emerge. In 2020, during the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reunion special, Hubert and Smith reconciled on camera, with both acknowledging the pain caused by years of misunderstandings and public silence. By then, however, the damage to her career had long been done. Janet Hubert's story is a quieter kind of cautionary tale. She didn't take on the whole industry, just one injustice in her workplace. But in Hollywood, even that can be enough to cost you everything. 11. Monique Samuels. Monique Samuels wasn't a Hollywood movie star. She was reality television royalty. As one of the breakout personalities on The Real Housewives of Potomac, she brought beauty, wit, and a sharp tongue to the screen. Viewers loved her confidence and her willingness to speak her mind. She had brand deals, a growing fan base, and a carefully curated image that seemed built to last. Then came the moment that would split her career in two. During a heated altercation with a fellow cast member, the drama exploded beyond the cameras. The incident became a media storm, and the network leaned into it for ratings. But when Samuels began publicly criticizing the producers and the network for exploiting her personal life and for allegedly creating a toxic environment, the tone shifted. She claimed she was being portrayed unfairly, edited into a villain, and targeted because she refused to play by the unspoken rules of reality television. Give the producers what they want, keep the drama going, and never turn the spotlight back on the machine itself. By the next season, she was gone from the show, walking away from a platform that had made her famous. In interviews, Samuels said she was at peace with her decision, but she also acknowledged that speaking out against a network came with consequences. Brand partnerships evaporated, and the difficult label followed her into new opportunities. Reality television had opened the door to fame and slammed it shut just as quickly. Her story is a reminder that in entertainment, whether scripted or unscripted, power rests with those who control the edit. And the moment you speak against them, you're no longer part of the story, you're written out of it. 12. Kathy Griffin. For decades, Kathy Griffin built her career on the edge. A stand-up comedian with a razor-sharp tongue, she was beloved for her fearless, often outrageous takes on celebrity culture. She won Emmys for her reality show My Life on the D-List and sold out theaters across the country. Griffin had made a brand out of being unapologetically herself, and Hollywood seemed to have room for her, until it didn't. In May 2017, a single photo changed everything. Posing with a prop meant to resemble the severed head of then-President Donald Trump, Griffin thought she was making a piece of political satire. Instead, it set off a firestorm. The image went viral within hours, and the backlash was swift and devastating. Sponsors cut ties. Venues canceled her tour dates. CNN dropped her from its New Year's Eve broadcast, a gig she'd held for a decade. The reaction wasn't just professional, it was personal. Griffin says she received death threats, was investigated by the Secret Service, and found herself effectively blacklisted from television. Friends and collaborators in the industry distanced themselves. The woman who once thrived on controversy had become too hot for even late-night talk shows to touch. It took years for her to slowly rebuild her career, largely through international tours and self-produced projects. But the mainstream opportunities she once enjoyed never fully returned. Griffin has remained defiant, framing the incident as a cautionary tale about the fragility of free speech in the entertainment industry. Kathy Griffin's downfall wasn't about losing her edge, it was about finding the line Hollywood wouldn't let her cross, and realizing she'd already stepped far beyond it. 13. Isaiah Washington. In the mid-2000s, Isaiah Washington was riding high. As Dr. Preston Burke on Grey's Anatomy, he was part of one of television's hottest shows, earning critical praise and helping the series win a Golden Globe for Best Drama. Charismatic on-screen and respected for his craft, Washington seemed poised for a long and steady career in prime time. Then, in 2006, a behind-the-scenes incident changed everything. Reports surfaced that during an on-set argument, Washington used a homophobic slur toward co-star T.R. Knight. The controversy exploded in the press. Washington publicly denied the allegations then later issued an apology, but the damage had already been done. The following year, after repeating the slur backstage at the Golden Globes while trying to refute the story, Washington's fate was sealed. ABC announced he would not be returning to Grey's Anatomy. He claimed that he was being unfairly targeted and that the incident had been misrepresented, but Hollywood wasn't interested in nuance. Almost overnight, the offers dried up. Roles in major network television disappeared, replaced by occasional guest spots and independent projects. Washington would later speak out about what he saw as political maneuvering and hypocrisy within the industry, insisting he had been blackballed for refusing to conform. His career never returned to the heights it had reached before the scandal. For Washington, the price of speaking his version of the truth and refusing to quietly disappear was a permanent shift from the center of Hollywood's spotlight to its edges. 14. Jean Seberg. Jean Seberg was Hollywood's golden ingenue turned international star. Plucked from obscurity at just 17, she was cast as Joan of Arc in St. Joan and later achieved worldwide fame with Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless. With her pixie haircut and vulnerable intensity, she embodied a new kind of screen presence, modern, restless, unforgettable. But in the late 1960s, Seberg's off-screen life drew the fury of powerful institutions. Sympathetic to the civil rights movement, she supported the Black Panther Party, donating money and speaking publicly in their defense. For Hollywood, this was dangerous enough. For the FBI, it was intolerable. Under J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO program, the FBI began targeting Seberg, planting false stories in the press that she was pregnant by a Black Panther leader. The smear campaign spread like wildfire, destroying her reputation. Tabloids feasted on the lie. Directors stopped calling. The relentless attacks drove her into depression, and she struggled with mental health for the rest of her short life. In 1979, at just 40 years old, Jean Seberg was found dead in Paris, the victim of an overdose ruled as probable suicide. For many, her death symbolized the devastating power of character assassination, proof that speaking out against injustice in America could cost not just your career, but your life. Jean Seberg remains a tragic reminder that in Hollywood, rebellion against the system doesn't fade quietly. It gets silenced, often brutally. 15. Mira Sorvino. In 1996, Mira Sorvino stood on the stage at the Academy Awards, clutching the Best Supporting Actress Oscar for Mighty Aphrodite. She was radiant, grateful, and on the cusp of what looked like a long reign in Hollywood. Her talent was undeniable. She could disappear into both dramatic and comedic roles, and major directors were eager to work with her. Then, almost without warning, the momentum slowed. By the early 2000s, the flood of offers had turned into a trickle. Sorvino herself didn't understand why until years later. In 2017, during the wave of allegations against Harvey Weinstein, Sorvino revealed that she had been sexually harassed by the powerful producer in the mid-1990s. When she rebuffed his advances, she said, "He retaliated." Director Peter Jackson would later confirm that Weinstein's company had advised him to steer clear of casting her in The Lord of the Rings, claiming she was difficult to work with. Similar stories emerged from other filmmakers. Without realizing it at the time, Sorvino had been systematically shut out of major opportunities, her career deliberately stunted. For over a decade, she worked mostly in smaller, independent films, far from the spotlight she once commanded. Only after the Me Too movement did her story gain widespread attention, and only then did the industry begin to reckon with what had been taken from her. Mira Sorvino's journey is a stark reminder of Hollywood's unwritten law. Cross the wrong person, and you can vanish from the screen, no matter how bright your star once burned. Speaking out didn't just cost her roles, it cost her the career she had earned. 15 names. 15 lives that followed a pattern as old as Hollywood itself. Each of them stepped forward, cracked the glossy veneer, and told a truth the machine didn't want told. Some did it in a single shocking moment, a torn photograph, a pointed speech, a refusal to play along. Others fought quietly, pushing back against contracts, politics, or abuse that everyone else seemed willing to ignore. And every one of them paid. Some with their careers, some with years in exile, and some with the erosion of their public image, until they became unrecognizable to the audience that once adored them. The punishment wasn't always loud. More often, it was a phone that stopped ringing, a role that went to someone else, a door that once swung open without knocking now firmly shut. Hollywood likes to celebrate bravery on screen, the hero who stands alone, the rebel who speaks truth to power. But off-screen, the real version is messier. There's no sweeping score, no final applause, just the reality that speaking up often means stepping out into the cold. Yet there's a through line in all their stories, not just loss, but defiance. They may have been silenced in the industry, but they weren't erased. Their words are still out there. Their warnings still echo. And as audiences, we get to choose what to do with them. Because the price of truth will always be high. The question isn't whether these stars should have spoken. The question is whether we, watching from the dark, will finally listen.